Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another eShepherd virtual fencing webinar. To many of our existing customers joining us, welcome to you guys, and a few familiar faces there, which is great to see, and a few emerging customers considering virtual fencing as an option. My name's Mark Dempsey. I'm the eShepherd Business Development Manager for Australia, based on a property in northern New South Wales, and also Zippo. You've met Zippo, many of you have met Zippo before, the wizard. So Zippo is our global customer success manager, and he'll be walking us through a few of the basics today on the platform, because we do have a lot of new eShepherd customers coming online in the coming weeks. So we're just going to touch on that for about 10 minutes. Thank you to all our colleagues. I can see Jamie there. Jamie's the BDM in New Zealand. We've got Charles Liebergreen in the US and a couple of the other team members over there. So great to have all the eShepherd team members join us as well. And as always, the purpose of these webinars is really just to provide a bit more information for you guys, a bit of, I guess, after sales support for anyone that is an existing eShepherd customer, and, you know, provide a bit of value and training around the platform. Couple of quick housekeeping matters. I know most of you do have your microphones off, but if you haven't, do you mind just putting yourself on mute, please? It's just really helpful when we're listening to the speakers. And yeah, as always, I encourage all of you to ask questions through the chat function, which is at the top of your screen. So just write your questions, and we've got some eShepherd team members there ready to answer those as we go along. And if you want to ask a verbal question, by all means, just hit the little raise hand button at the top of your screen, and we'll endeavour to answer those questions as we go along as well. Once we catch up with Zippo for about 10 minutes, we've actually got a little treat for you guys. We've got 2, maybe 3 existing eShepherd customers, beef producers, one in the US and one, maybe 2 in Australia. And those guys will be just sharing their experience on eShepherd, you know, their journey from considering virtual fencing right through to, you know, the benefits that they're seeing on their farm. It's a warts and all, as I say, I guess, explanation of what they're seeing. We want you guys to get a really raw experience from other beef producers and, you know, connect with those guys. So this is all about creating a community. And yeah, so we will run for the 60 minutes. Zippo, we got a bit excited last time. We ran for the 90, but we will keep it to the 60. So we'll with that in mind, we'll punch on. Zippo, over to you for about 10 minutes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Mark. Right, so yes, today we will just briefly go and have a look at the web application, and I'll run you through some of the basics of it, just so that for those people that are joining us that are new to this virtual fencing and the eShepherd system, get a little bit of a taste for how it works. So I'm going to share my screen and share the eShepherd platform. So this is what it looks like when you log into eShepherd, and you can see this is our demo property. Many of you have seen this a number of times before, so I won't dwell too much on it, but the white lines are the physical fences on your properties, and then you can see some of the orange lines here. These are virtual fences, so a solid orange line is an active virtual fence. These orange dots are where your animals are. So we've got 2 mobs. We've got a heifers mob, and over here we've got some Angus cows. And you can see there's a bunch of dotted orange lines, and they are inactive virtual paddocks that are ready to be turned on. So I'm just going to give you a very quick introduction on how easy it is to do fencing these days, because, you know, fencing costs a lot of money, except if you're doing it virtually. So it's well, it's not for free, of course. You need an eShepherd system, but once you've got that, then you can create as many fences as you like. So it's as easy as just pressing the create button in the bottom here, and then you can start your fencing. So I'm just going to draw a very basic virtual fence that overlaps some of the physical fences. You can see really easy to draw a shape. Then you can start to move your fence posts around if you like, and you need some really complex boundaries. You can draw those as well. The system is very intuitive to use, and I think from many of our current users, we've heard that they get the hang of this very quickly. So you can define your virtual fence boundaries really easily, and press save. And now let's say if we did have some animals in this area here, you know, they would be fenced by the physical fences in this area here and a virtual fence boundary that we've drawn here. So Of course, this gives you a huge amount of flexibility with how you want to manage your pastures. In particular, if you've got complex areas where there's some creeks running through your property that you want to keep animals out of, you can just draw those boundaries wherever you like, and it follows the contour. And it's really easy to keep your animals exactly where you want them to be. And then if I go over to this example here that we've pre-prepared, you can see at the moment we've got some of the animals contained within one virtual paddock. And then it's really easy to extend their grazing area by simply opening up a new section of pasture. So very easy to move forward in the paddock, continue to allocate more pasture to them, until a point comes along, here we go, until a point comes along where you can start transitioning your animals to the next watering point. So it gives you lots and lots of flexibility on how you want to break up your larger paddocks and intensify your grazing. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from some of our customers and them showing us some of the examples that they've applied on their property. Instead of looking at the demo property, we'll have a look at some customers' properties and hear what they've done. So that's a really, really brief introduction to the virtual fencing platform. One little tip that has come up a few times now that is handy for people that are already using the platform to know about. If you've made some selections, like I have at the moment, I've selected this virtual paddock here, and you want to let go of that selection, you want to clear that selection, there's actually a little shortcut that is not very well known of, and it's the Q button. So if I just press Q on my keyboard, it unselects whatever you've got selected. So that's a nice little tip for current users. But with that done and dusted, I think we can hand over to and introduce one of our customers in the US. Brandon Arpan, would you like to share your screen? Or actually, how about first you introduce yourself, and then maybe you can share a little bit about your operation.
Yeah, sure thing. So hi, everybody. My name is Brandon Arpan. I am a rancher in Southeast Montana, about as the extreme southeast as you can get, but what you might call the short grass prairie. We do have some different terrain, but we're mostly short grass. We do have some creeks that have some trees and whatnot. We're running just over 100 head at the moment, but here in just next month now, May, we'll be bringing in some summer herds, and we'll go from about 100 active neck fans, or just over 100 active neck fans, to just shy of 700 active neck fans. Been working with eShepherd since actually about a year now. We were number 8 in the United States to pick it up, and it's been going really, really well. We honestly would never go back.
Awesome, Brandon. Hey, do you want to, now I was just sharing a moment ago your property on the web app. Did you have some pictures, or did you want to share anything from your end? Have you got something that you can share with the members here today?
Sure can. If you just either share it for me or give me the permission, because I don't actually have that button.
Oh, really? Did we not grant permissions to share screen?
Did you want to, Zippo, just bring up the platform and start sharing that, and Brandon can start talking, and then I'll just see if I can add him as a, yep.
Absolutely.
That'll work.
All right. Should I, maybe I'll just zoom out again, just in case, just to give some perspective of where we are. So here we are. There's North America. Here's Brandon's operation here. We'll zoom in on it, and
now,
you can talk us through.
Sorry,
yeah.
I was going to say he's got access now, so he can probably present. Thanks, Brandon.
Oh, very good.
So,
thanks, Zippo. Good work.
So this is just a quick, of basically what I've already said. We do see some pretty decently extreme temperatures for anyone that's curious of how well it works during the winter, how well it works in at least decent heat. There's a lot of places out there that get hotter than what we do, but we've run it through all the way from the -60 all the way up to the 110, and it's been working no problem. And then this is like a picture of one of our base stations. It doesn't seem like the video is playing very well, but we do put a temporary electric fence around this one specifically because it was in a pasture that had unneckbanded animals. We didn't want them destroying it. But that's and we also have guide wires up on the base station to help with wind. Um, uh, Everyone always asks how well, if it gets muddy. That's a prime example. And I'll kind of just cut it there because I know you guys have other users, but the two big things that everyone always wants to know is, does it work? And the answer is yes, emphatic yes. It works very, very well. Even in conditions such as this that you're seeing, we're absolutely covered in mud. It was still working for days until all that mud fell off. And then the second thing I always love to point out to people is the ways that you can use this system that you never envisioned. There's all the things that the eShepherd team will tell you that you can do with it, the intensive grazing, and that's all true. They're not lying. But then there's all of the ways you might find to be able to use this system. Like, we never thought that we could sort one mob into two. We never thought that we could use it to essentially gather the animals in a way for us. So I haven't gathered our herd in a year. I manage the grazing, so they end up right next to the corrals because we do have a water source next to it. And we turn up 20 minutes before we need to work them. We pull them into the corral. We do what we need to do, and we either load them on trucks or, we turn them loose, whatever's happening. We've saved 4 animals that would have otherwise died in the creek. We've saved a calf. There's just so many different ways that we've seen the system work that we never really truly thought were really going to be possible.
That's amazing, Brandon. That is probably the discussion we have with a lot of people. They go into it looking at, potentially 1 to 2 benefits of rotational grazing or strip grazing and pasture utilisation, and then all of a sudden discovering, all these other benefits of locating your animals. If your animal is stuck in a situation that they can't get out of themselves, being able to get those alerts on the system, and if an animal's down for 8 hours or more, you'll get an alert to say, hey, this animal's not moving. So that's really great to hear. And interesting to hear that you're managing your grazing and your animals to bring them back to the yards or corrals, as you call them, in the US. But that's quite a common question that comes up in Australia. I know, I'm not sure about New Zealand as well. So really great stuff. That power autonomy as well, that's really interesting. There was a lot of mud on those solar panels. And do you find that you have to get the animals in and scrape it off, or do you find that it comes off naturally when the mud dries off?
So we never had to get a single animal in for any of that mud. Basically, I wouldn't call it a particularly muddy year for us. We were actually quite dry, but during the spring we still got a decent chunk of moisture there. And what you see on the left is how most of the neckbands looked during all of that. You could see even the pugging that's kind of going on with her hose. It just helps to tell you how muddy it was. And just through them drinking at the reservoir, drinking at some troughs that we had, and then just the sagebrush, the grass, it ended up knocking most of that off. And what was actually kind of interesting, because we were honestly very curious if it was just going to keep operating or if we would ever get low battery warnings, is after all the big chunks had knocked off, the solar panels were actually still like smeared with mud. Think of your windshield getting smeared with mud. And after it was that way for several weeks, honestly. But enough of the solar panel, and right there you can see that it looks like maybe a third of that solar panel is showing, and it was the same way on the other side. That seemed to be enough for us with the sunny days that we were getting to keep them going without any issues. Now the one on the right, that came from an incident where I was talking about the 4 animals that nearly died, and we pulled that one off of one of them. And so that neckband had actually been submerged down in water and mud for about 24 hours. And I took it out, just sat it there and kind of put it in the back of the side-by-side because I wanted to know how long it would keep working. And even trundling around the pasture, it just kept recording its location, even though it was that caked in mud, doing exactly its job. And after about a week, it's finally when it gave me the low battery warning. So I just, just kind of knocked it, and all that mud came flying off, and it was charged up within, not even 4 hours, I think.
Yep. So for those that you haven't seen an eShepherd neckband, they've got a solar panel on each side. It is spring loaded, so it's designed to take some impact as that animal drags that along the ground as it's grazing. We've got plenty of customers that have stowed them away and haven't actually deactivated, which is generally the process we like to follow. and they can be in the shed 3 or 4 weeks and they're still communicating, and that's how we know, because we get the non-movement alerts. So power autonomy, what I'm hearing, Brandon, is not an issue, and those muddy conditions also, the neck bands are recovering quite well. So you're on a LoRa-based system. How many base stations do you have on your farm?
So we do have 2. When we first began, we actually only put one of them up, again, because especially in our place, we have been doing the best we can to try and push the system. We want to know where the wheels fall off. That way we know just how far we can push things. And it was probably towards the end of the year when we finally had our herd, nearly 3.5 miles away from the base station. That's when we started seeing not bad communication between our neck bands and the base station, but it was enough that we finally decided to put up that second one. And then we moved. We have a different spot where we winter our cows, and we moved one of the base stations down to our wintering area. So we're currently back on just a single base station. But
Yep.
Once we go north again, we'll be on more than one.
Yep. So I'm just getting a few questions, Zippo, come through there on the chat, which I think Charles, thanks Charles, answering a few of those. But just to clarify for those that haven't sort of explored too much in the eShepherd system, we have 2 forms of communication within the neckband to get that information to and from the cloud, or the platform where we manage it. So firstly, originally eShepherd was designed for the LoRa base station. And essentially a LoRa base station is a repeater that you saw in that picture before on Brandon's slides, where that's communicating to the cellular network, or in extreme cases we're pairing those LoRa base stations with a Starlink, so we're connecting it to the internet, and then that's acting like a repeater on your property. So that's communicating with those animals or those neck bands back and forth. In a lot of cases we generally like to have 2, A, because it gives you better coverage, and B, it just gives us a redundancy system if we need to, as a backup. It's not often that they do go down, but for some reason they get damaged, or there's a lightning strike, or just something very unforeseen. I find personally in Australia, 90 to 95% of our customers are on the cellular version. So we have the cellular neckband, we have a SIM card in that neckband that's communicating directly with your local cell provider, and that's globally as well. So, in one respect, that is probably the preferred option, because you don't then have to invest in base stations. But for those properties globally where we don't have adequate phone signal, we use a LoRa base station system. So we've got the option of both. Hopefully that answers some of the questions there. Brandon, is there anything else that you wanted to share about the training of your animals? That's probably a little while ago now. I think May last year you were saying you implemented eShepherd. How did you go with the training, and how quickly did the animals, or slowly did the animals, adapt to the neck bands?
So our first group that we trained, they had never been exposed to virtual fencing. Of course, we used to do temporary electric fencing, kind of like what's in the photo here, or the video here. Just a single polywire fence that was getting moved every few days. So they were at least kind of aware of the concept of getting moved fairly more often than the typical set stop grazing of several weeks or months. And I would say 80% of all the cows were trained within 48 hours. The remaining 20% was anywhere from just over the 48 hours to nearly 5 days for the most stubborn animal. The old cow that's the old biddy in the group that, by gosh, she's always gone to that corner of the pasture and she's gonna go. And eventually she, after 5 days, she figured out, oh, okay, I don't like getting the tone, the beeps and squeaks sort of stuff, and she quit. She then just followed the rest of the herd, and within 5 days they were all trained. And then actually just here in December we bought another group of cows, another head of 50, and we put it on them, pulled them out there with the group that was already trained, so they're all together, they're all intermixed, and for them, easily within 2 days. Some seem to get it almost right off the bat. In fact, it's kind of astonishing. The animals seem to learn quicker than we do as humans.
And we eat them.
That's right. It is a really good point that you make there, Brandon, because I do say to new customers, hey, give your animals plenty of time to adapt to it, and give yourself plenty of time to learn how the system works as well, because that's right. There's a learning curve for both animals and humans, for sure.
No, that's great, Brandon. I guess, for anyone that's considering virtual fencing as an option, I mean, if we're looking at rotational grazing in that perspective and thinking that we'd like to do some strip grazing or replace current strip grazing with a virtual fencing solution, it is really quick from that initial discussion with, a representative to essentially having neck bands on farm, on your animals, going through the training process. I mean, I would say a month would be generous, Zippo. I mean, people... I've had customers in Australia here within 2 weeks, they've been up and running and virtually fencing. And, when your animals are going to be trained, I mean, how quiet your herd is, you know your farm better than anyone. So it's really up to the individual to determine that. But what's really interesting on the platform is we can see the audio ratio versus pulse. So that's basically a percentage scorecard that's given to every animal based on their responsiveness to the eShepherd neckband. So as the animal walks towards the virtual line, they get a audio and pulse, I guess, sequence, and we can measure, or the system measures, how many audios versus pulses. So what we want that percentage to climb as we go on, so that animal is receiving more audios. They're responding to the audios because they understand that the audio is a warning that if they keep walking in that direction towards the virtual line, they're going to get a pulse. And that, I guess, percentage is a really good indicator of how our herds, I guess, training, and of course you get those, as Brandon said, those cranky ones or those bitty ones, that will be, down in the 50 and 60 percentile. So what we want to achieve is sort of 80% of our herd to have that audio pulse ratio over that 80% mark, and that's all part of the training process. So that's great, Brandon. I think we've covered a fair bit today. Is there anything else, comments or thoughts that you wanted to share if you were sitting around, having a drink with a mate and you wanted to share about eShepherd?
Oh, I mean, honestly, there's a lot. I'm pretty passionate about it. I've been following, virtual fencing since 2017. But yeah, it's just like I said, all the ways that you end up using the system that you never really envisioned, especially to maximize your grazing potential, maximize your forage. We had a whole section of our pasture that in years past it maybe saw 10% coverage by animals on any given year, because there's hardly any water down there. And I utilize kind of two different methods, like methodologies, when I'm designing my virtual paddocks. One is kind of like a pie method, and the other one's more of a strip method. And I was using the strip method then, and we easily achieved 60% coverage, and I was being kind of cautious with it. We could have pushed that higher, but when you're talking about that much more coverage over forage, we were able to stockpile grass on a dry year, on a drought year. We were able to still stockpile grass, which our neighbors, they weren't able to do that. They were almost ready to start selling livestock, and I was going, well, gosh, I have grass left over, guys.
Yep. I'm not sure, Zippo, I don't know whether you just want to grab Brandon's platform again quickly, but are you currently using laneways, Brandon, for moving animals around your farm?
Yep. So I can actually kind of show you a little bit of that. That's like, I can always come back. So on the left side, that is actually using a laneway. Where you see all those dotted black and orange lines, we were out there kind of grazing our herd. It was time to bring them in. I apologize, don't remember what we were doing. I can't remember if we were conditioning or if maybe we were branding, but they had calves with them. They were out in that farthest north area of the pink, and I turned on that laneway after it had activated for the whole herd. They just naturally want to go get a drink of water, but they couldn't get to the water source they had been, and they just follow that natural curve, kind of bumping around it as they encounter the beaks, and they end up down at that blue kind of water droplet, which is another water source. And then there was a holding area that I had down there, and they just basically then just sat there until the next day when I could get out there to work them in the corral. So yeah, we use eShepherd as with laneways and whatnot.
Yep, and we do have a few customers using that feature. It's more so probably when your animals are trained and your animals are really comfortable with what an audio and a pulse are. Zippo, for anyone that's looking at building laneways, they're an existing customer, their animals are trained. Can you just give us a quick sort of view on how wide your laneways need to be when you're setting up virtual paddocks around watering points, how far, because this is a question that comes up, how far should I put my fence around, troughs and dams? Can I split dams in half? Is that something that you recommend or not?
Yeah, good question, and yes, it is important to talk about that. The minimum width of some of these laneways, it certainly can vary a bit depending on your operation, but we wouldn't want to go much less than, say, 10 metres, which is what, 30 feet in the imperial system. I think, Brandon, probably your laneway there is much wider than that. Is that right?
It is.
Like, do you have an idea?
Yeah. So that laneway is probably upwards of 100 feet.
Yeah. And that's what we're finding. So my recommendation, it really depends on a particular situation on your farm where you're trying to use a laneway. I do say that if you've got some physical fences that are already part of the laneway, then try and keep your virtual fence boundaries away from that physical fence. At times, animals do like to walk along the physical fence, so that can give them stimulus as they're moving parallel to that virtual fence line. So I say keep them away if you can, and maybe just use one of the virtual fence boundaries to keep them in check and keep them in a laneway. But yeah, really there are no hard and fast rules around how you do that. I've seen so many different examples of it, and it works really effectively, as Brandon has just said. So yeah.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Brandon. That's awesome. And yeah, I'm sure Brandon, being a really intense user of the system, Brandon will be joining us on further webinars. If not, we'll be lassoing him and dragging him in because he's, I think, got a lot of value to share with us, and and what he's doing and achieving, multiple benefits. So thanks very much, Brandon. And feel free to chip in for the rest of the webinar. Righty, we might go across to an Australian customer, Peter Miles. Peter's been using eShepherd for some time now. So can you hear us okay, Peter? I think you're online there.
Yeah, I just turned my camera and microphone on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Loud and clear. So Peter's based on a property 70 kilometres south west of a town called Bundaberg, which is in that Queensland area. And of course, our thoughts and prayers go out to all those flooded Queensland affected customers. So it's quite devastating. We've had some serious weather events in Australia, starting with the cyclones in Townsville, and then of course Alfred in the southeast, and then now the flooding in Queensland. So you guys are getting a lot of rain up there. Have you had much rain, Peter, on your property?
Oh, look, we've dodged the worst of it. We've had about 260 mil in the last fortnight, I guess, which is what's that for our American friends? About 10, 12 inches, something like that.
Yep. So significant.
Well, 160 mil in one day.
Yeah, right. That's nearly 7 inches. Yep. Yeah, no, well, I mean, from all reports, that's probably on the lighter end in some respects. But yeah, Peter, thanks for joining us. So Peter actually, he's a sort of I guess what you call a longer term user of the eShepherd system. Peter recently hosted a field day and, is really sort of, I guess, pushing the boundaries and exploring what's possible with eShepherd. So, Peter, just for the benefit of the audience, can you just walk us through a little bit about your operation? You're a breeding operation. We know you're in that sort of eastern Queensland area in northern Australia. What was the thought process around looking at virtual fencing as an option? What were you doing before, and then sort of how did you migrate into coming on board with eShepherd?
Well, I guess I've been interested, as similar to Brandon, been following the virtual fencing for many years. I did, before e-fencing really came online, install, I think about 20 paddocks with single wire electric fence. As a result, I did a course with RCS in Australia, which is in America, grazing for, what do they call it? Ranch management services, or ranch management services, I think it's called. Yeah, it's the same ideas. and they're big advocates of daily moves or weekly moves and all that sort of thing. So I did divide about half the property up with single wire electric fences, and I was using that. But I had always been keeping tabs on the virtual fencing because I really saw that as the optimum way to go. And I must say, when I put in the electric fencing, I very quickly found out that I had my paddocks too big. Even though I had multiple paddocks, they were too large to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And the cost of changing the electric fencing is really extravagant. The other issue with electric fencing in my area, I'm in a subtropical area, and you have to spray the fences every 3 months, otherwise they just get so overgrown that they short out and stop working, and or get the wire physically gets dragged to the ground. I mean, it's just, when you get a good season, it's extraordinary just what happens. So that is a lot of work to do it. I also have, and I don't know if you could see it on when Andrew brought up the screen, I've got about 6 kilometres of frontage to a weir. Yeah, that is a river there, you can see, but that's actually a weir, which is a dammed off river, so it's effectively a dam that's used in an irrigation scheme. You can see the farms around us there, and 6 kilometres is about 4 miles of frontage. The problem with it is that the water goes up and down when it's being used for irrigation very quickly, and at times I'll be there one day and my fence will be right into the water, and I'll come back a week later and there'll be 50 metres of sand around the end of the fence. So it was a real problem. And with barbed wire in the water, it just doesn't work. It just rusts very quickly. It's not a suitable solution. So what you can see I've done is, when I set my virtual fences now, I actually put them out into the river. So I've the cows never go around the end of them, and they've sort of stopped trying, I have to say, because they've learnt now that it doesn't matter, and not that a cow's going to swim, but that there's no point going out into the water because the fence is still going to be there. So that was a real motivator for me, because it's if you're trying to control your animals in specific paddocks, and I was using the river as the water source, so I couldn't cut the river off. It was a real issue with animals wandering around the end of the fence and getting into the wrong paddock, and then you have to try and move them back, and just a general mess up. So there was maintenance of the fences. There was the labour cost of the continual spraying, which I've been doing, but I also had a chap working for me for a good while who's just finished working for me because he's got a better job, and that has really drawn all my focus onto the issue of labour. I don't know what it's like in the US, but getting skilled, enthusiastic labour for farm work in our area is virtually impossible. For reliable people, I'm talking about. You can get somebody who'll come and make a mess, and if you've got pride in your property and you want to look after it, and you've got a $75,000 tractor and a $10,000 sprayer and all that sort of stuff, you really don't want somebody wrecking those things. So I think labour is going to get increasingly difficult. I think anything we can do to cut down labour is going to be a major advantage, and I see the virtual fencing as a real labour saver over the long term, both in the construction of fences, the maintenance of fencing, spraying, all that sort of stuff. Also, as Brandon mentioned, with what we call mustering here, where those cattle are at the moment, I've got to take them to the yards on Sunday. My yards are just near there. I've been able to move them. I don't know if you can see the yard. I've got so many virtual fences up there, Andrew, that it's just a blob, isn't it? But if you'd hit the one's not, see that the yards are that little square.
Over here
in the bottom. No, down. That's my house.
Zoom
out again. See,
this
the light. Yeah, that's the yards there. So you can see I've got a holding paddock, a laneway, and then the yard. So I've got those cattle in a strategic spot there. On Friday, I'll probably move them into a virtual paddock that's even closer and more contained, so that I can then get them in. I've got that white laneway there as an actual barbed wire fence that leads up to the yards. So now I've got contractors organised to come on Sunday morning. We've got to dehorn, brand, castrate, all that sort of thing. I'm confident that on Saturday I can myself get those cattle into the little holding paddock there and into the laneway. And on Sunday morning when we arrive, it's just a matter of, chasing them up in the yards and away we go, rather than having a big, cowboy turnout where we're running all over the place for half a day trying to get the cows to the yards. So it's really worked well. And just on that, until this morning, I actually had, if you just bring your cursor up the screen a bit, Andrew.
Yes.
Yeah, I just to the no, you've gone too far. But you can see there's an area to the left of Andrew's cursor where there's just a small group of cattle there. I actually had that area where those parallel lines are. That's some tree things there. I had that area excluded because that's actually a nice flat that has good grass on it. I know the cattle will hammer that area compared to the area of bush that you can see above that. So when I let the cattle into that paddock, I excluded them from that flat, and this morning I opened it up so they could get there. Now my thinking is that I will then attract all of the cattle to that flat, and I can cut off that bush area and have them closer to where I want to get them into the square to go to the yards. So I'm using the nice parts of the paddock as a magnet, as it were, to move the cattle around.
Yeah, wow.
One of the things that I think is really good that I haven't heard mentioned much is the heat map function that you have.
Yes.
Because it enables you. Well, you can see where I had the area I had excluded there quite clearly. But the heat map enables you to see where your cattle are grazing in real time. So, and what you'll notice is how little time they're spending in that bush area. So what I try to do is to push them into that bush area first when they first go into the paddock, so that, because I find that the utilisation improves the pasture, so to speak, particularly in those areas that can't be cleared. We have in Queensland vegetation management laws that prevent us from clearing remnant vegetation, so you can graze it but you can't clear it. So if I just had that paddock as one large paddock, I would end up with all of the stock basically grazing the cleared area and nothing going into the bush except when they want to go into the shade on a hot day. But by being able to exclude them from most of the pasture area, it pushes them up into that bush area. Also, that's the side of a hill there, and we've had all this rain, so that's a better area for the cattle to be spending their time than down on the nice pasture destroying it in the wet weather. And you can see where they're going to that little holding paddock. I've actually got, you see the water drop there. I've got a trough there, so they go backwards and forwards here, just where your cursor was. So I'm moving them around there. And I'll just show you another thing I just did recently. If you just want to take the screen, just go down a bit on the screen.
Yep. Okay.
And take it to the left. You can see there, just where your cursor is, that's one paddock, and then there's a little square there to the left of it. That's actually a water hole, you can see there. And then I've got another two paddocks there. And I moved them from the paddock. It's hard for me to point out here, but
you see, maybe I can show it on the movement of the heat map. This is the last 30 days, so this was going a little bit far back.
Well, actually, that's pretty good, actually, if you do that, because it shows how I moved the cattle, because I went from one paddock to the next paddock to the next, which I excluded a flat from, then I let them on that, and then because they were watering the central water hole, they went across to the other paddock that's at the top right there, which I actually cut in half, and I was not at the farm when I did this move, I actually just left the gate open with the see how I've got that cut in half. Now to get them to there, at that water hole, there's an electric fence there. I just left the gate open when I left because I was coming back to where I live in Brisbane for a week. I left it open. And then when I was ready, I virtually opened the gate, so to speak, and let them into that half. And it was really interesting to watch because I haven't pushed this really hard, but you always get a few adventurous ones, and they were the first ones to go and rub up against it. And I got, the first half a day, there was one or two got out there, then there was 4 or 5, and then there was half a dozen. And then it's a bit like a Venturi effect. You get a certain number and then whoosh, all of them go out. And then they went into that half. And then after a few days, I let them up into the next half. And then the chap who was working for me, on the last day he was leaving, I got him to open the gate on that second half. And we just put a bit of electric fence tape across the main access into the property, which we didn't even make live, and into that paddock where the cattle are now. He opened the gate. He attracted, as he was leaving, 2 or 3 just to come across the road, and then he went home. And then all the rest in due course just followed across. So I'm sitting in Brisbane, which is 4 hours drive from my property, and I'm essentially moving those cattle, as you can see, around a substantial area. That's probably an area of 600 acres. I've moved them around there. And, one morning, honestly, I was lying in bed doing it. Which I know it sounds like I'm Scottish, but I thought,
what's the world come to? The future of farming from bed on your mobile phone.
I don't even have to get out of bed to do it.
That's pretty cool, Peter. It's great to see. And again, you're experiencing, I guess, like Brandon, multiple benefits. We're looking at not having physical fences, having the ability to change our paddock sizes as we see fit, breaking down those paddocks to smaller cells without physically putting fences in that we have to spray, that we have to add additional water points, that when we do want to renovate our pasture, fertilise, spray, whatever, we're not having to open a million gates, do a million turns in those small cells. Very typical of what a lot of people like yourself in the eShepherd journey or along the path are experiencing. You've got that creek issue, so you're excluding that. You're able to make the fence adaptable and utilise that or keep cattle off it. Utilising the poorer feed first in that top paddock that you were sort of talking about. You've created an exclusion zone, so that's another feature of the eShepherd system, that you can put an exclusion zone within a paddock. So if you've got those sweeter areas that you want to keep and use later on, or I know Kent Rochester, we talk about Kent a lot, down in southern WA, he's got a hay shed right in the middle of one of his blocks full of hay, and his neighbour just can't believe that the animals can't get into the hay shed. So and then of course bringing your animals slowly into the yards is another disguised feature that people are discovering. So no, that's great, Peter. And we've got a little bit more to get through, but thanks very much for sort of covering off your journey. Have you got any other sort of thoughts or again, like Brandon?
A couple of things on it that are not directly related to the application itself, other than the use of the application. And what I would say is, I think about succession planning on a property, and the fact that my property will never provide a replacement income for my children because they've all got their own careers. But by having these sort of tools available, you make it possible for them to be involved in running the property and such without physically having to be there all the time. I think also having this tech stuff makes it more attractive to younger people to be involved. Yeah, okay.
We have spoken about that before, and it's a really interesting point you make. I mean, the younger generation are interested in tech, and yes, they want to be involved, but some of those older methods, I guess. And if we've got something to replace it and we can utilise this technology, that's fantastic. Again, thank you so much, Peter. We've had a few chats over time, and you've hosted the field day, and we'd love to see you on further webinars. So I think just before we go to the next one and the last speaker, we've got Brandon there with a question. Hey, you are on mute too, Brandon. Sorry, mate.
I was just going to echo something that Peter said, which is so the event that I spoke about of saving 4 animals. I was actually half the country away, and I happened to get the alerts on my phone, and basically was able to figure out that there was a problem. Notified other people that were still on the ranch, and we were able to save them. So his comment about moving him from his bed, yeah, I can say the same thing. And this whole system has allowed me to have like a whole second job with the military, just because of I can be so involved even when I'm away during training.
Yep. Have you experienced that, Peter? Have you got animals stuck, or have you got the notification set on when your animals do get into your paddocks?
I have. Unfortunately, it was a really old cow and she was stuck in the mud. Once again, river issues that you have. So I couldn't save it. But on the other hand, I knew exactly where to go to find her. And so I could get the collar. And I was thinking, if this old cow had died normally in the paddock, I wouldn't have even known until I'd got them in and counted them all. And I don't know, I'm not very good at counting cows. Some people are, but, and at least I knew what was going on. I could keep myself up to date. I was aware of there's a possible problem area there that I have to think about. So I knew what was going on. So, yeah, I think that's important. I have to compliment Brandon on his use of those laneways and that. I think he's really given me a challenge there to see if I can do that as well.
So you're saying you'll be mustering from bed, Peter? Is that the goal, mustering from bed at 6 o'clock in the morning?
I don't know about that, but sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback. But
that's all good.
It was excellent to see, and one of the things I like about eShepherd is where it is all around the world, and we're getting just that college of ideas from all around the place and different points of view. I think is excellent.
Well done. Well done to you, Peter. I'm glad that you're having a great experience, and I appreciate your thoughts with everyone else. I'm sure you've stirred up some thoughts for other potential eShepherd users, considering the technology. Thanks.
If I can just jump in here quickly, just with this discussion about, being able to use the platform for so many different things, I just wanted to point out and give you guys a little bit of a glimpse of the future of what we are looking at here at Gallagher, to start bringing a lot more things into this ecosystem that we have that will allow you, and this is all future stuff, right? It's not stuff that we are capable of doing at the moment. It is the beginnings of it, but we are looking much, much further ahead, where we have a lot more integrated pasture measurement and pasture management available through the eShepherd ecosystem, where we have animal performance measurements coming in from, say, things like our auto weigher, which can, is this platform, the Strongbow is a platform that you can place out into your paddock and get live updates of weight gains of your animals. So now you know how much pasture you have out in your paddock or how little you have. You can see the weight gain of your animals live. You can start making automated decisions on where your animals should be grazing to really optimize that utilization. We are working on animal health detection so that we've got a whole raft of things coming online there, and these all take time to develop, right? But it's work in progress. So we'll have animal health measurements coming in. We'll be able to monitor the entire reproductive cycle from animals getting in calf and detecting that they're in calf, and then also the calving of those animals. So lots and lots of technologies that we are actively working on to bring together. The vision for us is to really make that accessible to farmers. We are working with lots and lots of other companies. We don't intend to do everything ourselves, so we are collaborating with people that are already doing some of these things really well. So very exciting space. You know, when I hear our farmers, what they're able to do with the technology already at the moment, and when we start thinking about what's coming in the future, it is pretty awesome stuff and pretty exciting. So really glad to have you guys along the journey with us.
No, thanks, Zippo, and that's a really nice wrap on what is to come, and the fact that we're investing continually, not just in eShepherd, but to develop it further, but other options. Great, Zippo, great, Peter, great, Brandon. I've probably got a few minutes left. We're about 10 minutes till we finish, so I might just ask Adrian Story if you can hear us, Adrian. I did see your microphone off there before. If you're happy to chat. So Adrian's a beef producer in Dalby in Queensland, central Queensland or south central Queensland. Adrian's a recently new customer to the eShepherd platform. How's things in Queensland this morning, Adrian? Are you nice and wet up there?
A little bit wet this morning. It's going to rain all day, I think, so that'll be a good thing. We haven't had the flooding locally here, so we're actually enjoying the rain. But overall,
that's great. And just for a little bit of context about Adrian, so Adrian's got some country of his own. He's got a bit of lease country, I believe. But yeah, Adrian, did you just want to sort of step through a little bit about what you do in terms of your operation and I guess your journey to eShepherd and that original phone call with myself late last year, the driving force or the driving mechanism that why you, I guess, were considering virtual fencing as an option?
Well, I've been following you for quite a while. Basically, I've just wanted to do this. I just see it as the future. I do off-farm stuff as well, like many of other people on this call probably. And to me, I just see it as everything you could possibly ever want. It just gives you visibility that you just don't have. I've got 65,000 acres. I don't care how good you are, you don't know what everything's going on 65,000 acres. And I've got a lot of trees. So it makes it challenging. You can see I've got a bit going on. I'm actually in the early stages. I've got a lot of collars still in my shed, so I'm still fitting them. We had a few questions on the cellular connectivity. They're actually, those the green triangles, they're actually ones that are sitting in my yards waiting for a few cows to turn up and get put on. And that's actually our test neckband in one of the utes leaving site now that I didn't even know they were going there, but I can see that it's actually, they've been in and out today.
No, that's interesting, and we all know, and I can't speak for the rest of the world, but of course in Australia, the 3G shutdowns caused potential drawbacks in terms of the coverage that the Telstra network, which is the network we use to facilitate the communication between the cellular and neckbands. And look, Adrian's property was in question, but we do have good processes in place to make sure if you're new to virtual fencing, or we think about virtual fencing rather, we can send a test neckband out. And we can, take that neckband around the property. That's just a free service we offer to make sure that thing's going to connect to the network. It's going to check in as it should. We can see all those analytics on the back end of our platform, like signal strength, communication performance. The neckbands are designed to check in every 10 minutes. So, we were looking at Adrian's property to see, particularly in that scrub country down in the southern parts there, were these neckbands going to connect, and were they going to check in adequate amount of times? Now, I think, doing some rough numbers, Adrian's communication performance was around that sort of 87 to 93%, which for what Adrian wants to do was, acceptable. So it is interpretational on a case-by-case basis. But Adrian, you mentioned before you've got, I think, 170 odd or 172 neckbands. You started with 20, you put them on animals. And you're certainly having a bit of a play around with the system and exploring a few different options. Can you walk us through, what you've been doing so far in terms of, your paddock sizes and, you've got a few different mobs going on there?
Yeah, so I've got a bit going on. Half of this is me playing and half of this is actually me using the system. So I've got some paddocks there. I've just saw a cow near the yard, yarded her through the collar on, and it's purely just to gain data. So you can see that purple one there, the orange one, the pink one's down the bottom. They actually started just as a bit of a trial to make sure I could get good connectivity. So my initial, if you zoom in near the top northern yards there, the weaner yards where that triangle is. So that's my weaner yards there. You can see those two paddocks there with the red mob and the pale blue mob there. So they're my two training paddocks. My main desire for this was ability to muster. So I've got a helicopter turning up on not this Monday, but next Monday, the 14th. That cost me, I've got to get 2 helicopters in because of the size of paddocks, because one helicopter just can't cover the country. So you're talking 10 grand a day just to have 2 helicopters turn up on your property.
Ooh.
So, and that's only doing one paddock. It's just completely different
the cost.
idea of it. Yeah, the cost.
Yep.
This will eliminate a hell of a lot of that. So you're going to see probably 172 collars fitted on Tuesday the 15th, I think, on the system.
After you get the bill from the helicopter company, and we've seen that with Brandon, and we've heard from Peter as well. Like just this mustering from bed scenario at 6 o'clock in the morning. I think it's got legs. I think it's going to have a bright future. So,
I did that with that. You can see that laneway there up to my yards. I did that. Those ones that are red there, I particularly picked out a few misbehaving cows and put the collars on them purely to test. I was trying to break the system. That's just how I behave with most things. I try to find where my limits are, and then once I learn the limits, I stay inside them. Those cows are particularly misbehaving, and I mustered them from my house. And I live on another property, which is probably 40 kilometers, or probably only 30 kilometers away. Yeah. And I didn't do it from my bed, but I did it from my office.
It's and that's a common theme. We're seeing yourself. We're seeing Peter's working remotely, and Brandon. We're hearing from him. Working remotely, the military contracts and what he's doing. But there's some common themes here. That's interesting. I think we've got a lot to share on your platform, Adrian, and we're probably going to try and rope you in for the next one as well, if that's all right. But really great to see that you're exploring the different options, and that helicopter mustering scenario, I think in those bigger properties and ranches has got some real opportunity. So we are getting towards the pointy end. Sorry, Adrian, to cut you short there. We didn't think we'd get this far, but so quickly. But plenty to share. And if you don't mind jumping on the next one in a month's time, we'd be grateful to have you back. So I've just put a poll in the chat, guys. If you guys, just before you jump off, don't mind taking a couple of minutes just to, there's 5 basic questions there. Can you see that, Zippo? Is it come up?
Yes, I can. It's come up nice in the middle of the screen. So hopefully that's come up for everyone to do that quick poll.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you.
And what Zippo is doing after each webinar now, you've probably got the emails, the follow-up email for any questions that we didn't answer. I think Charles and JC and a couple of the others have been answering a few of those questions. Thanks, guys. That's really helpful. This webinar will be available offline after the event. And for anyone that's an existing eShepherd customer, the bottom right-hand corner of your platform, there's a little question mark in a round circle. And you just go in there and there's a section dedicated to webinars. So all our previous content will be in there. I guess one of the questions that we had for you guys, which I probably didn't put in the poll this time, was, how often do you want to see these webinars? We have been doing them monthly, but there just seems to be so much to get through. So if you're looking at, potentially wanting to join fortnightly, we're happy to do that. It's really based on you guys. And Zippo's got the webinars up there. So that'll come out in the next few days once he tidies it up and puts his little bit of polish on it. So just before we go, thank you again to the 3 speakers, Brandon, Peter, and Adrian. Sorry to catch you off there, Adrian. I had you G'd up, but maybe next time we'll share a bit more of what you're doing. Has anyone got any final questions? Yeah, feel free to take your microphone off mute if you've got any further comments or questions. Happy to take those for a couple of minutes before we depart. No, we're all good.
You should share your control and highlight feature that you taught me the other day.
So on a call with Adrian, that's a good point. Thank you, Adrian. Yesterday, Adrian's question was, Mark, I want to just see on the platform how many animals are in a particular paddock or part of my paddock. So one of the features, and I think Zippo is just bringing it up there now, what you can do is you can hold in the control key on your keyboard, and then you can use your mouse and literally drag a sort of a white square over a group of animals. And then you'll see on the right-hand side there, Zippo's got if he jumps on the animals menu there, which is the fourth button down, up the top there you can see, I think it's 8 selected out of 52. So you can just do a really quick count of a group of animals in a particular paddock. We also use that control and drag mouse function when we're doing a track and trace feature. So if Zippo wanted to know, or Adrian wanted to know those particular animals he's just highlighted that you see there, we can go down the bottom and hit the tracks feature. And what that does is that will give us full transparency of those animals' tracks for the last 7 days. So really handy if you want to know where your animals are grazing in a particular paddock, and also handy to know how well your animals are responding, because every time they interact with a virtual fence, a little icon will come up, and you can see more towards the left there where Zippo's mouse is, those little green icons indicates that there's been an audio tone emitted. And if you've got a troublesome animal, which we all have them, you can actually just highlight that one animal and see how many times that animal's interacting with that fence, or if there's a weak part of your paddock where the animals are crossing consistently. So just another, I guess, one of the many features. So looks like you've got reasonably good containment there, Adrian. They're all behaving, which is nice.
Yeah, they took a couple of days to educate, but once they're educated, they've been quite good actually.
Yeah. Yep, that's interesting. And Zippo, we generally say to people, Zippo, don't we, that 7 to 10 days is a sort of adequate training period, but consistently we're hearing that people's experience is generally far less, providing they've got their paddock size right, they've got some physical boundaries and some virtual.
That's right. I do like to just emphasize though that give your animals time. Like some of them start responding really well, but if you've got a larger group of animals, there will be some that are more of a follower rather than a leader, and they'll interact less with the virtual fence. They'll be watching some of the leader animals interacting with the virtual fence. And then it takes a little bit longer for some of them to really understand how they're supposed to respond to the audio tone. So whilst we see some awesome compliance with the virtual fence in the very early days, I do say that just be patient with them for as long as you can, so that they all understand what they need to do and remain contained. And we certainly see that over the first couple of weeks, really, of introducing animals to virtual fencing, they all pick it up. We haven't yet seen any animals that don't eventually respond and are really well contained. So, yeah.
Quick question from Thomas Alexander. Thomas, have you got a question for us?
Yeah, I added it to chat already, but I was just going to bring up on our range that we're running the system on, it's quite steep in a lot of spots. And one thing I found was comparing the web app to a contour map helped a lot with following contours to keep cows or allow cows to kind of contour around the landscape a lot easier. And I was just gonna maybe suggest in the future if we could have some way of adding layers to our maps. Contours would be super helpful. I know in BC where we are, there's a lot of polygons and management areas that lots of ranchers have to consider. So working like some of those, or being able to add some of those layers in, would be super handy.
Yeah. Look, and there is a lot of work going on the web application and also our mobile application, being able to bring different maps in. You've probably, for some of the users that have been with us for a while, you've probably noticed already that there are more and more base map layers that we can choose from now. So there's a bunch of different ones here. They are still just the visual part of the map, but being able to bring in some other information is absolutely also in the backlog. It's just, we need more time to develop some of these features, but
Excellent. All right. Once more, thanks again to our speakers for jumping on. Fantastic. Thank you all for joining us. The recording will be available, sent out in the coming days. If you've got any more questions, contact your local business development manager. Myself in Australia, we've got Jamie Waghorn in New Zealand, Charles Liebergreen, JC and Cheyenne in the US. and Canada. So yeah, any questions, just jump on the eShepherd website for your respective country. And yeah, keep an eye out for the next webinar. We'll keep you on the contact list. Any feedback, send us an email, put it in the chat. And yeah, thanks again for filling out the poll. And yeah, we'll take all that feedback on board and just aim to get better. And yeah, I think we're really getting some momentum, Zippo. We're getting a lot of interaction from people, which is fantastic, which is exactly what we want.
That's right. No, I appreciate everyone coming on today. And yes, if you are interested in sharing your operation, please let us know as well, and then we'll prioritize that and give you an opportunity as well to share some of the cool things that you're doing.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, guys, and thanks, Zippo, for your efforts and yeah, chipping in. So, all right, guys, have a good day. Stay good, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See you guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Cheers.